Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. She is the author of interesting book, Chin Hairs and the Other Things Mama Didn't Tell You, from surviving to thriving in your 20s and 30s, no other than Miss Kelly Knowles. Welcome to Book 101, Miss Kelly, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Yes, Daniel, thanks for having me. Obviously, you can tell that I come from, or I grew up in the southern United States by way of parents in the Midwestern United States. I have done a lot in teaching and training, professional development. And this book I actually started in my 20s. It was an act of love to finish it. And I am super excited to get to talk with you about it today.
Yes, 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 for sure. And Miss Kelly, thank you so much for sharing your empowering book. I hope people are very empowered through this book. So, what does the book reveal about unexpected challenges of adulthood?
Yeah, so if depending on where you are now, one of the things that I found in my 20s is I kind of joke it's your second puberty. So there were so many things that we go through. And I remember finding myself going, why didn't anybody tell me this? Why didn't
Yes.
I feel prepared? I'd gone the college route as a traditional college student, and now I found myself in adulthood, whatever that means, and I just felt unprepared in a lot of ways. For whatever it's worth, my mother has read the book and approves it and had a good laugh with a lot of it. So I really wanted to write something that was the book I wish I'd had. And
Yes.
because we cover a lot of important, kind of heavy topics, it's written with a lot of humor. A local author to the Nashville area, local artist rather, did all of the illustrations. And so I tried to bring a lot of fun stories and a sense of whimsy to topics that can kind of be tough when you're in your 20s and 30s and beyond.
Definitely. So, how can embarrassing imperfection lead to personal growth in your 20s and 30s?
I think one of the things is it helps to build your self awareness and recognizing that you don't have to get it all done, that everybody has their own way of growing. There are some people that get married and have children in their early 20s. I married in my mid 30s and found myself a stepmom. And then within a few months, I was a grandparent in my 30s. So we all have different paths, but there's a lot of common denominators: how we choose to manage our career, where we choose to live, the loss of a parent, the loss of a friend. All of those are universal subjects that I think we can all relate to, and it impacts our growth.
So, what are the key lessons the book offers about self acceptance?
I think one of the most important things to know is you are beautifully and wonderfully made. I believe everyone is on this planet for a purpose. And one of the things that I think is really important is knowing your identity. I wrote the book, and one of the things I was observing was during the pandemic. I know we're kind of all tired of that, but I found that a lot of people didn't really have a foundation in their life like they thought they did. And so it's really important to know who you are. What are your values? What is your foundation? And sometimes that takes a minute to kind of think through, especially if you're dealing with a lot of influences telling you what those things should be. But I think self awareness is incredibly important. I continue to work on mine, but I think that is one of the pieces that the book really talks about: is establish your foundation, know your identity, know who you are, and know what you're standing on.
Definitely, totally agree, Miss Kelly. So, how does the book address the importance of setting boundaries in relationships?
You know, I have people have said, Kelly, you're really good at boundaries. I'm very fortunate in that I had two parents that modeled boundaries. Not everybody gets that. But when
Yes.
you recognize there is freedom in boundaries, there that is one of the things that so often things that don't seem like they could be, they are. It's kind of like a routine. I talk a lot when I work with coaching clients. Routine can actually be your freedom because then you're not looking for your keys so you can get where you need to go. There's a routine for where those keys are. And so I think boundaries are very similar because then you know how far and how deep you need to go, maybe in a relationship, in your job, in an organization where you're volunteering. Boundaries can be incredibly freeing and they can take a lot of anxiety and weight off of your life. There's a lot of books out there that look at boundaries if that wasn't something that was modeled to you. But I do think that also comes back to what do you stand for, what's important to you, and then it makes those boundaries come in a little bit easier.
Definitely. So, what are some of the practical life skills discussed that people often learn the hard way?
One of the things that I talk about is things like your finances, your home, maintenance of your home. Now, those may seem very boring, but I try to write them in a way that gives a lot of humor. I tell a lot of stories on myself about mistakes I made early in my career. And those are pieces that can really make a difference. Being intentional about what you want your home to be, even if it's a small, tiny apartment, even if it's a room in a house you're renting. I've done both of those. Your sense of home can be really valuable. Thinking about where you want to live, how do you want to interact with other people? Another area I talk about is in the areas of just general taking care of yourself. This sounds so random, but I bet a lot of people can relate. When you go to the dentist or you go for your yearly checkup, they'll say, do you want to go ahead and schedule your next appointment? And that seems daunting sometimes to think about a year out, but I always try to go ahead and make that appointment. It doesn't mean that it may not change, but what it does is it sets up a routine where I don't have to worry. Did I make that appointment last year? Did I get this done? Do I know when I'm getting my eyes checked? Those types of little things. I always talk about there that mastering the mundane because those are really mundane. They get you to the magic because instead of being in that slog of figuring out all of that stuff, you're managing your mundane so you can go do the fun things. So you can go do the things that really, build your soul and that you find energy from. So the book has chapters in here about relationships, about your home, about your finances, about your health. I had a doctor tell me in my 20s, walk your dog 3 miles a day, whether you have one or not. I love that advice. I've not been so good the last few years about taking that, but there's some wisdom in what she said. And she was talking about setting up those simple things within your personality, within your style. And I think that's one thing, Daniel, people tend to look at other people and compare themselves. And what I like to do is let's take that comparison away because that can also lead to imposter syndrome and think about what is going to work for you and your style. And so we look at health, we look at your spiritual growth, we look at relationships, we look at the financial pieces and try to bring in some very practical items that people can pick up on and then make it work for them.
Very well said, Miss Kelly. Very well said. And how does the book tackle the topic of financial independence and stability?
One of the things that I have joked about is that early in life, I was a member of the I have to figure it all out by myself club. And it's not a good club. I always joke, get rid of your membership, drop it. It's not going to serve you. So when you think about things such as finances, for some people, it comes very easily. They may be blessed to have more finances. They may be in a good job, but You don't have to do these things alone. There are people who love talking about money and organizing money and figuring out how to manage things. So when it comes to your finances, if that's not an area of strength, take the shame out of it. Now, who's willing to help? There is a man at a local bank here that I met. He helps people for free. He will not take money. He loves to help people sit down, no matter where they are in their financial state, and help them make a budget. And he doesn't shame. He puts together something reasonable. My husband and I sat down with him many, many years ago. And so many of the elements that he helped us put together, we still do today. And we've been in times of where we had a little bit of extra. And then, Daniel, we've been in times where there was nothing extra and we were wondering what we were going to do. So there are people that will help you. You don't have to do these things all by yourself. You can figure it out, and you can do it by getting other people to help as well. It's amazing how many people love to help.
Definitely. If you need help, ask help, people. So, Miss Kelly, what advice does it give for a managing career challenges and finding purpose?
You know, I'm a person of faith. Now, the book was written for anyone. So if that is not something that's part of your life, then you can still read the book and get a lot out of it. For me, my faith establishes a lot. It helps me understand my value. It helps me understand, where I see things that are better for me or not so good for me. I also talk about a personality profile in the book that I'm certified in. There are several out there. I also give a little bit of a caution because you want to vet, you want to make sure that those profiles that you're looking at are real and they are not your identity. They are a tool in your toolbox. But in the book, I do give a link to a profile that I'm certified in that I found really helpful because it helped me understand how I'm driven. I talk about being an inner leadership coach. And what I mean by that is it's so important to know what drives you. What drives you, Daniel, may be different from what drives me. And so having that understanding of what drives you, and then that helps you kind of make a plan for how you're going to set and achieve goals and so much more. But I must say that my faith is a really strong foundation for me, and it helps to inform a lot of other things.
A lot of other things, people. So, how does the book redefine the concept of thriving for modern adults?
Of thriving. So, one of the
Yes.
things that I think is important is that we all go through seasons and we have to recognize life is not a straight up line. It's not necessarily a straight line. If you think of a little child who gets a hold of a pen and you just kind of see all kinds of loops, that's how life is sometimes. And, sometimes we're going forward and sometimes we're going backward. What we want to keep in mind is that are we taking steps that are moving and helping us develop our purpose? But sometimes we get on that mountaintop and then a valley will hit and we don't know what to do. We're like, I want to be back on the mountain. I try to think about the mountain is there to give you a vision of really good things, of where you can go. But sometimes you've got to get back down into what I call the slog, because sometimes there's some work that has to be done. Sometimes you have to make choices. The hardest thing is when you have a lot of yeses that you can pick. And then you've got to find that best yes. There's actually a book out there called The Best Yes. So, thriving, I think people think you're going to thrive forever. Life happens, life brings real things. Wednesday, before Thanksgiving, I was baking a pie. I'd never made a pumpkin pie. I thought, I'm going to make a pumpkin pie. It's late Wednesday evening. I look over at a corner of our kitchen and I thought, this floor is shiny. Why is this floor shiny? And we realized that the drain for the house was flooding the kitchen and the laundry room. That was not a thriving night, Daniel. We were up until after 1:30 the night before Thanksgiving. We're about to have a whole house full of people trying to figure out what we were going to do. And the next day, even though I was seeing family and people I love, I was on my knees in my bathroom at my bathtub washing dishes. I will say to you, um, on the outside, it didn't look like a thriving moment, but I have a grandson that headed off to the armed forces next week. And that whole time I was on my knees washing dishes, he was drying them. And I got one on one time I would have never gotten had this not happened. So sometimes we have to kind of flip how we're looking at things. And thriving isn't always money coming in and everything working out. It might be a different way that sometimes we have to look at what thriving is.
Definitely. Again, Miss Kelly, very well said. I like it. So, what insight does the book offer about dating and relationship during these decades?
You know, I know that it's changed. When I was dating, I've been married a little over 20 years. Things have changed. There weren't things such as dating apps. We met in a little bit more of a traditional way. But there are universal themes, and one of them is know what you stand for. What are you looking for? Why are you dating? Are you dating to make yourself feel validated as a human? I always like to remind people, I've already said it in this conversation, you are here on this planet on purpose for a purpose. That may or may not mean you're in a relationship. I also think it's really important that you know yourself and who you are and be able to do your thing before you pull yourself in with another. Because so often people look at a relationship as a goal. Being married is one of the hardest things I've ever done. And when you bring in children, and often blended, I'm in a blended situation. So my husband had children from a previous marriage. There are four grandchildren as a result of that. And so I found myself being called a grandparent in my 30s. That flipped me out a little bit. So you really have to be mindful what's important to you and be able to know yourself first. I think sometimes people think a relationship is the fix for everything. And I'm going to disagree. I think it can be a wonderful add-on. I think it is meant for some people, but I'm also going to offer I don't think it's meant for everyone.
Definitely. So, Miss Kelly, you are too pretty to be a grandma.
Oh, you are very kind.
So, in what ways does the book highlight the importance of friendship and support systems?
I write in the book about mistakes I've made. I write about times when I wish I'd supported friends better, and also about finding the group that fits you. I have a sign over here in my office that says, create the things you wish existed. Now, that doesn't mean that I can become 5'10" all of a sudden. I'm 5'2". I'm not going to be able to create 8 inches, even with really good shoes. But what it does mean is that um, find out, look for the things that you know will build you. Daniel, I love books. I was part of a book club pre pandemic. When the pandemic hit, none of the women that were in the book club wanted to meet on Zoom. I put a post out on Facebook, and now I'm still in a book club. We meet one Friday a month. And what's been so beautiful is there are people in that book club that go back to my high school days, that go back to my college days, and they're from all over the country. And we get together and we talk about books. It fills my need for community. It allows me to continue to stay in contact with friends I may not get to normally because life, and they live so far away. And so when we think about friendship, there are lots of ways that we can build friendship. Every Saturday for the last 5 years, I've had a study in my home on Saturday mornings, and that is a source of joy in my life. And I wanted to build an environment where people could come in on Saturday morning and have a cup of coffee and breakfast, and we do a study, and they're comfortable and relaxed, and they don't feel like they have to be anything but themselves. When somebody tells me I feel like I can be myself at your home, to me that is one of the most it's really rewarding because so many people don't feel that way when they get to be with others. So when we think about friendships, we have to think about how we're bringing ourselves to the table, and then also be creative sometimes. Think about what you need. Not everybody needs a lot of friends. Not some people are fine with one or two close friends. You've got to kind of think about what works for you. And again, don't compare yourself to someone else. What is the best fit for you?
Definitely. So, speaking of friendship, how does it suggest handling toxic relationships or friendship?
I think one thing is to know, going back to what you were talking about with boundaries and going back to um, what is friendship to you? Does friendship mean that you are always doing things together? Does friendship mean that you're building that I'm here for you if you need to talk, if you need someone to pray with, if you need someone to give you a ride? I think that's where, um, when you think about toxic, everybody has a bad day. We're not always perfect with our friends. We're not always perfect with the people we live with. But how do you feel when you're with that person? Are you feeling less than? Do you feel like you don't? For women, often it's, do I feel like I'm dressed good enough for them? Do I feel like they're going to judge whether or not my hair is fixed? And to me, I had a friend many years ago, and that was a comment I was getting regularly. Every time we were together, there was something about my appearance that wasn't okay. And I thought, okay, wait a minute. I adore this person, but every time I'm with them, I'm not feeling like I'm okay enough. And to me, that wasn't a good sign. Now, some of it I think is they were unhappy. So we have to kind of be mindful of that. But are you doing things you don't believe in? Part of the toxic is, are you finding yourself spending money on things that aren't important to you? Are you trying to just fit in and get along? Easier said than done, but I think those are often can be signs. And then there's, unfortunately, there's real abuse that happens for people. And I'm not qualified to speak or fix that or even help someone except tell them to go get help. But I think we have to be mindful of, um, if you're not doing things that fit within who you are and it's harming you, there's probably some toxicity there.
Yes, let it go, people. Let it go. So, Miss Kelly, what would be your advice for those people out there in their 20s and 30s?
I think more than anything, you have value. So often, I remember when I first job out of college, there was a woman that worked there, and we became friends, but she was not pleased. I was too young to work there. Hadn't earned my stripes. And for me, I have people, for my Saturday study, we've been in ages 18 to 60. Daniel, I can learn so much from an 18-year-old with new perspectives. Tell me what you think about this. A 6-year-old can do the same. We can help each other. And so often I see people in their 20s, particularly, and I want them to know their value. I want them to know you have so much to bring to the table, fresh eyes, new ideas. And then, flip side of it, I wish I had been more coachable in my 20s. There were a lot of people I think that wanted to help me, and I might have been a little bit stubborn, and I probably had some pride. And I wish I'd been more willing to let some women who were older than me mentor me. I think that put me back a little bit. And so I would put it both ways. You have incredible value. And then, flip side of it, there are people that aren't going to lecture you and tell you how to live, but they could offer wisdom, and that could be a valuable relationship to have. So age is not, it doesn't have to be a dividing factor when it comes to people. And take
Definitely.
advantage of the fact that you've got some energy. It's lovely.
Yes, money can buy books, but not wisdom, people. So, Miss Kelly, what are your short term and long term goals in writing?
One of the things that I did with this book is I wrote a PDF journal because I wanted people to have a way to reflect on each of the chapters. At the end of each chapter, I have questions called Looking in the Mirror. And they're just questions for someone who wants to take it to a little bit deeper reflection. Some people really love to journal. And I've had some feedback, hey, I wish you had that in a physical form. So behind me, I have several pages that I've written on over this year of ways that I want to expand that journal and get into a physical format. So I've been kind of exploring how would I want to, what kind of format. And that is something that I'm very excited about getting finished because it's taking that PDF and really turning it into a real book. The other thing that I'd like to do again, I did some for Color Code, I wrote a series of blogs. And I'd love to find an opportunity for somewhere that would be a good fit to write some short blogs, just some short little articles that are just thought provoking. And so those are the things that I'm looking at for 2025. I don't sit down and do the discipline of writing quite like I did a couple of years ago. And that's been nature of life and jobs. And that is, so I want to be more intentional about especially getting that journal into a full size book this time.
Looking forward for more books to come, Miss Kelly. And to sum up our discussion, how does the book inspire readers to create a life aligned with their values and passions?
One of the things that I had mentioned is I tell funny stories on myself. I tell poignant stories. So you're going to laugh and cry throughout the book. And it's relatable, it's real life. And so I think that inspires people because they look at this. I've heard so many people say, oh, it wasn't just me. Oh, I remember feeling that way. And that to me can help you understand you are not alone. You are not alone. And so that was my goal, was to again write something that I wish I'd had and inspire and encourage people. We need more light. We need more reminders that we matter, that we have value. And the other thing I talk a little bit about is giving back. That can be incredibly
Yes.
rewarding when you find the right space where you can give back. It lifts you up. That's exciting. So that was my hope. And I've had feedback that the book encouraged them, that they highlighted things. I did record it on Audible, and I had one woman tell me she was listening to my book while she was painting her house and laughing. And I thought, gosh, what that humbled me. It really humbled me. It made me feel really good.
For sure, you talk about sex too in that book, in your
I
book.
do.
And
I
you do.
do. It's done in a very, it's not a salacious way.
Good
It's
manners.
done in addressing when and why, because I think that it is, I believe in waiting and I believe in marriage. I know that is very countercultural, but I also know, again, it gave me so much freedom in being able to be in relationships and not fear loss. And so again, it's a little countercultural, but I do think it's worth addressing, especially at that age. I think kids need to be taught better earlier. There's too many taboos out there that
Yes.
could be cleared up. I've done programs for girls 9 to 12, and we bring in experts. I brought in a police officer the last time I did it to talk about social media. I brought in an image consultant to talk about how you present yourself. And I think it's really important that we provide good information, because otherwise they're going to go get it somewhere and it may not be the best for them.
Definitely, people, let's educate our young
Yes.
children.
Yes.
So, Miss Kelly Knowles, thank you so much for sharing your empowering book. I hope more empowering books to come. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your book?
Yes, I would love it. If you go to Amazon, you can find Chin Hairs and Other Things Mama Didn't Tell You on Kindle paperback on Audible. You can also go to my website for the free journal, kellyknowles.net. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Miss Kelly. And let's support Miss Kelly Knowles. As I said, more empowering books to come. More to come, people. See you soon. So, Miss Kelly, you are most welcome to come back next year to promote your next